Oh, hello and welcome to What Are We Talking About with Jamie Jakes. I am him, and today I'm here to review with y'all a super flex rookie mock draft that I was just a part of. Now, this is a rare draft because it involves several brilliant minds in the fantasy football community. You have to be a real degenerate to be doing mock drafts for your rookie super flex dynasty league at this part of the season. It did have a couple of dummies, I will be honest, but everyone participated all the way through to the end. It was a 4-round draft. We will be focusing on the first 3 rounds. And there were some big surprises along the way, so let's take a look at this great mock draft with some brilliant brains who were involved. So my take, if you have a top 4 pick in the rookie draft this season, is if you need a quarterback, draft Caleb Williams, hopefully, or Jaden Daniels, one of the two. Drake May is also a great option if you believe in him as well. I just think Jaden Daniels at the moment has a little bit higher rushing side. But if you do not need a quarterback, I would highly recommend you at least make a solid attempt to trade back either for like a massive haul like Josh Allen or Jalen Hurts, or just trade back into the middle of the first round. But if you don't have any takers, I would definitely take Marvin Harrison Jr. first overall if push came to shove, just because he's safe, he's young, and I think he's going to be a superstar in the NFL, a blue chip wide receiver, one of the 2 blue chip wide receivers I also believe in Malik Neighbors. I just have Marvin Harrison Jr. a little bit ahead of him in my personal rankings. But this was a pretty chalky start to the draft, but it gets pretty interesting around pick 6, 7, and 8. So let's zoom in. J.J. McCarthy went at 6 overall, and this is probably predicting that he will be going top 10. That's why I recommend you do your rookie drafts after the actual draft so you know the landing spots of these players. But J.J. McCarthy going 6 wouldn't surprise me if he gets up there by the time it's time to draft. Brock Bowers goes right after him. I'm also a big fan of trading back. If you're in these middle rounds and you're not really quarterback needy or tight end needy, I would definitely recommend trading back into the late first round because there's just so many good guys, and we're going to get right to it. But Brock Bowers, personally, to me, I am a big believer. Obviously, you have to be with his production. It's undeniable. But tight ends, even if they are historical rookie tight end prospects like Brock Bowers, probably should be considered. Sometimes it takes him a year or two. So I would make a pretty solid attempt to trade back out of that 6 and 7 spot because J.J. McCarthy and Bowers have a really high ceiling, but they also have a really high floor and a high likelihood of getting off to a slow start, which you really don't want out of your first round pick, in my opinion. You know, you always want to win this next upcoming year. So here's where it gets really interesting. Before Rome Odunze goes Brian Thomas. I wasn't surprised with this group to see him going. I wouldn't be surprised if Brian Thomas goes before Rome Odunze in the actual draft. I think with Rome Odunze, so we'll get to where he was picked after Trey Benson. I think Rome Odunze, we're kind of suffering from an echo chamber on social media at the moment, and I don't think that echo chamber always echoes what the actual NFL executives believe. And personally, you can't deny an over 1,100 receiving yard season, over 1,600 receiving season, back-to-back seasons. The last 2 years we saw him in college. He obviously tests really well, but personally, I believe there's a lot of other wide receivers who should be in the conversation as being drafted ahead of him at the moment. So him going 10, which is why I think this is a really sharp group, didn't surprise me at all. What did surprise me, and honestly a pick I love, Trey Benson going 9th. There might be a team, I personally believe he is the best running back in this draft class, just on film. And then once he ran a 4.39 at the combine, I was all the way sold on him because the measurables matched what I was seeing on the field. The only knock on him is his production at Florida State, and I think we're just going to find out a lot of guys were misused at Florida State at the end of the day, which is shocking to know that they went undefeated this season. Anyways, Trey Benson is my number 1 running back in this draft class, and I wouldn't be surprised if he goes early second, late first round in the actual draft if somebody really, really falls in love with him like I did on film. This is a big group of free thinkers having Trey Benson going pick ahead of Rome Odunze. That's a pretty appropriate place to pick him, and here's where I get sniped. Mr. FF Tony, who hosted, he's a great Twitter follow, by the way, hosted the draft, put it up on social media, got everyone involved. He took Xavier Worthy, who I'm a massive fan on. We're going to talk about him a little bit more in the future, but obviously ran a 4.21. And there's so many people in the fantasy community now that are almost off put by how fast he ran. Like, who was surprised he was going to weigh that light? I think we knew he was going to weigh that light. I think we are a little bit surprised that he broke the record. He was a guy I was excited to see run the 40 because I knew he was fast on film, but holy smokes, he's really, really fast. And he's getting compared to a lot of other guys who are more just like track stars, but he's a baller. He's tough. He plays big, he plays strong, and the speed really shows on film. So the hate coming on Xavier Worthy, if you want to call it that, at the moment, he would be another guy I wouldn't be surprised gets drafted ahead of Rome in the real life draft if a team really falls in love with him, which how couldn't you fall in love with Xavier Worthy? I'm a big fan of him. But I was super pumped, and this is why you need to trade to the back of the first round, you guys, is Troy Franklin dropped all the way to 12 to me. That is an insane value. He's a guy who, in my personal opinion, is in the same conversation as Xavier Worthy when it comes to film. Troy Franklin almost caught for 1,400 yards his last season in college, which is hilarious that he's falling to me at 112. Testament to how amazing this draft class is for wide receivers. It's also just testament of what kind of values you can get in the late rounds here. Getting to the second round, we're not going to beat around the bush, gang. Keon Coleman. The first pick, honestly, I didn't love. I don't love Keon Coleman from a production standpoint, and I don't love him on film. He tested great at the combine. He ran great in the gauntlet drill. I'm not a fan of him. So him going 201 ahead of the guys that go immediately after him, I don't like it. Michael Penix being one of them. I love Michael Penix. And as you can tell, I'm a little bit low on Rome Odunze. Rome Odunze caught for 1,600 yards this past season, which by definition means I need to be higher on Michael Penix. And I am. I think he's an amazing talent. I think his accuracy is the reason Rome and the rest of his receiving class was able to thrive in that Washington offense. And I get it. He's a lefty. It doesn't look good to most people's eyes, but it looks good to my eyes. So I'm a big fan of him. Another pick I did not like was Jonathan Brooks going at 2-3. I don't like picking anybody who's injured coming out of college. I get it. He's young. I get it. He looked good on film. Maybe I'm used to seeing Bijan and Roshan running the football in that uniform, and that's why I'm not as high on him. But I'm not a big fan of him. I would not take him as the second. I wouldn't take him as the third. I would start thinking about it around the fourth and the fifth RB in the draft. Definitely not taking him before Ladd McConkey. That's insane. Will Shipley, I would definitely categorize as someone I would draft ahead of Brooks. It's going to be a landing spot thing for him. I don't think he's projected to go that high in the real life draft, but Eric 530 seems to think so. So I don't blame him for that. He is a guy I really love on film and ran pretty well at the combine. And here's Ladd McConkey. Honestly, I would have probably taken Ladd McConkey 201. If Troy Franklin wasn't there for me for whatever reason, I would have thought Ladd McConkey at 112. He ran a 4.39 despite his complexion. Ladd McConkey is extremely fast. He wasn't used very much. He didn't get a lot of opportunity, but when he did get opportunity, he thrived. His yards per route run at Georgia was insane. Low sample size. So you always take the counting stats above the yard per route run or yard per reception stats. But in Ladd McConkey's case, I love him on film. I love him in the NFL. I think that's going to be a steal if he does fall to 205 in these drafts. Bo Nix, 2.6. I'm fine with it. I'd probably not go quarterback unless I absolutely needed a quarterback right here. But hey, maybe Magic Mike, who I do happen to know, might be fishing for some new quarterbacks. So maybe he's in that thought process that he's drafting for a quarterback needy team. In that case, I don't hate taking Bo Nix at that spot in the draft. I do, however, dislike Audric Estime. Ran a 4.71. I don't care if you're running from a 2-point stance. You better not run a 4.71 at your combine when you're supposed to be at your fittest. A guy I wasn't really high on film. Honestly, I know a lot of other analysts were. Just didn't really pass the eye test to me, especially looking at the big runs he did have against the teams he was having those big runs against. That Notre Dame schedule wasn't as tough as you would think it would be. And I wasn't ultra impressed with Estime's performance. He's virtually off my board at the point, unless he just goes undrafted and I'll throw a flyer at him, fab dump on him if he does go undrafted in your rookie drafts. And here's Adonai Mitchell. So we got a smart group. Like I'm saying here, there are real analysts, and I'm going to do a whole video on this, that are ranking Adonai Mitchell ahead of Xavier Worthy, which is just outrageous to me. I get it that he caught a lot of touchdowns in college and that fantasy points in college do carry over to fantasy points in the NFL. You got to just believe in Xavier Worthy. I get the athletic profile of Adonai Mitchell. In my opinion, it did not show up on film as much as Xavier Worthy's athletic profile. So for that reason, unless Adonai Mitchell in the real life draft goes top 15 and Xavier Worthy falls to the third round, something crazy like that I don't think is going to happen, I'm going to ride with Xavier Worthy until further notice. I think it's insane that people are really drafting Adonai Mitchell in the first round ahead of Xavier Worthy. Insane. Corley, I'm not a massive fan of him, but I get you take him there. Jalen Wright, also another guy I'm not a massive fan of on film. I get that he ran really fast in the combine and looked really good in all the drills and all, but I'm not a fan of Jalen Wright. I am, however, a fan of Braylon Allen. He is my number 2 running back after Trey Benson. And Tony, of course, snipes me back to back. If I get Braylon Allen in the middle of the second round, I am beyond excited, regardless of landing spot, because I'm just a big believer of his talent. And he was recruited as a linebacker. He's not going to turn 21 until January. So we're going to be almost done with the regular season when Braylon Allen actually turns 21. He's super young. He's the second best running back on film, and he's a guy I believe can grow into a bell cow, a Derrick Henry type role, and just be a Derrick Henry in this league for years going forward. I'm a big believer of Braylon Allen. I'm also a big fan of Jatavian Sanders, tight end out of Texas. He's a guy who really flashed on film to me, had great production his last year in college, and would not shock me if at the end of the day, 5 years from now, Jatavian Sanders is known as a better tight end in the NFL as Brock Bowers. Would not shock me at all. Crazier things have happened, and that's why I think you want to trade back out of that Brock Bowers situation. Even though I am a believer in his talent, I think he's just a little bit too risky to be taken that early. And a guy like Sanders, you can just stash in your taxi squad for a year or until he breaks out this season. And I think he's really going to hit the ground running. He is a risk. My only knock on him is he's almost too young. He's 20 years old. And you kind of want your tight ends to be a little bit older coming out of college, just because they take a couple of years to get used to the NFL. So it is a risky move. Honestly, I wouldn't mind if I would have taken Blake Corum or Ricky Pearsall before him. Out of Florida, looks really, really good, really fast. Maybe didn't get the best production in college. It was decent, over 900 yards receiving. Maybe not in the best situation of all time in Florida for a receiver, but took advantage of the opportunities that he got. A guy who could just flash in the NFL for no reason. And we'll go through this. Really like Blake Corum. Really like McMillan. Not so big on Leggett. Not so big on Walker. Big on Polk. So the Washington receivers, the 2 and 3 Washington receivers, I'm not higher on than Rome Odunze, but where you're getting them, I think it's a pretty damn good value. Lloyd, good value at 3.8. I think that's appropriate for him to go there. There's some analysts who have him in their top 3, top 5. I don't see it on film. God bless you. Just not my thing. Roman Wilson, I think, could be the Puka Nacua version of this draft. Like, there's not going to be a wide receiver that goes in the 3rd, 4th undrafted in rookie drafts this season who's going to produce the number 1 rookie season in the history of the NFL. I don't think that's going to happen. If it's anybody, it's going to be one of the top 2 guys, right? But Roman Wilson, I think he's a little bit older, but I always love guys who shine at the Senior Bowl no matter what. I think that's a great indication that maybe they just weren't in a great situation. And for the same reason, I think we're concerned about Harbaugh in the NFL volume-wise is really what I think we saw out of Roman Wilson is just a volume issue, an opportunity issue, and a guy who just finds a way to get open, finds a way to exploit the hole in the zone. And I love guys who can exploit holes, And that's why I love Roman Wilson there at 3.9. Bucky Irving, appropriate to draft him at 3.10. No problem with it. Didn't have a great combine. Looked pretty good on film. I was excited about him the first time I saw him because he's got a couple crazy highlights, but a guy I just don't see really ever getting the volume that he'll need to be a reliable fantasy asset. And then I went ahead and took a shot at Spencer Rattler because why not? Because my thought process when we get past the Roman Wilsons in the draft is just take guys who have ultra high ceilings. And the sky's the limit for Spencer Rattler. It's probably not going to work out, but it's a 312. It's a throw-in pick. Who cares anyway? Don't take anything safe in the late third and the fourth round because you just want to be hunting for home runs. You want to be hunting for those guys that'll be league winners for you. Spencer Rattler's probably has the second strongest arm in this draft class and could find a landing spot, could develop into something pretty special. So please subscribe. We will be doing a video about Adonai Mitchell, digging in between him and Xavier Worthy. We will also be doing a video where I am going to show you my actual Dynasty fantasy football trades, and I want the feedback out of y'all. Please subscribe to the channel. Thank you, and good night.